How did the Soviet period influence the development of political Islam in Tajikistan?
In 1917, with the Russian Revolution, you had the Bolshevik Party very quickly introducing an enormous set of restrictions on religious activity, which over the course of the 1920s, particularly in the later 20s, began to be applied very harshly in Central Asia. And from that point forward, you saw extraordinary restrictions on the practice of Islam. So a whole array of attempts through what was called militant Islam to forcibly secularize society. This was followed then in later decades by softer forms of repression, which included the bureaucratic strangulation of Islam. And the prevention of religious participation. This was felt particularly harshly in Tajikistan and some of the southern regions of the Republic. So it becomes more politicized in some regions of Tajikistan than in others, as some are incorporated into the Tajik regime or the Tajik Communist Party on the basis of the fact that they were seen as more pro-Soviet and more atheist, or less religious, whereas the more religious population was increasingly over time excluded, and they become the basis for the origins of the Islamic movement in the 1970s and 80s.
What influences the degree of mass mobilization of political Islam across Islamic societies?
Focusing specifically on Eurasia, Central Asia and the Caucasus, what I have found is that internally within movements, there are really three factors that affect the degree to which they're able to generate a mass social following. One is whether or not they have sacred authority. And by that I mean, are there religious leaders within the party who have respect and sort of sacred or religious standing within society, so they can call upon a particular religious title or religious knowledge or respect because of their lineage. Another factor that's critical, I'd argue, is ideational adaptation of their Islamist ideas to the local social and political context in which they're operating. So for example, the Islamic Party in Tajikistan drew a number of its ideas from transnational Islamist ideas. Those advocated, for example, by the Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East during the period of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. But they took a lot of those ideas and they translated them into language that the local populations understood and could identify with. So in that respect, they were seen as being kind of local Islamist ideas, local ideas about Islam and how Islam relates to politics. And the third element I think that's important is being able to tap into legitimate local networks. So whether those be local village networks or local religious underground hujra networks from the Soviet era, or more broadly, in order to mobilize on a national scale, to be able to adapt into trans-communal networks.
What effect might the banning of the IRPT have on the development of political Islam in Tajikistan?
I think at the moment we're still waiting to see the long-term effect. At the moment, the IRPT has been banned, has been branded as a terrorist organization, as an extremist group, and it's entirely possible that this banning of the organization could feed militancy on the part of other organizations. Particularly groups like Jamaat Ansarullah or ISIS, which has been recruiting in Central Asia over the past few years. Those groups are likely to generate greater support for a more militant, more radical, more extremist form of political Islam than the one that the IRPT offered. So unfortunately, I think as a result of the government's ban, is we're seeing a move away from the potential for collaboration between a more democratically oriented Islamic party, which was what the IRPT represented, certainly in the post-Civil War period, to potential for greater support for a more radical, militant type of Islamist organization.